Hi, I'm John Hull, and I will be your instructor for the course Reading the Deuteronomistic History. I am glad you are in the course. Let me first say a few things about the content of the course. You may not be familiar with the term Deuteronomistic History. It refers to the collection of books that includes Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. These books tell the story of the people of Israel from their entrance into the land under Joshua until their expulsion from the land at the time of the Babylonian period. This story spans 900 years, from Israel's exodus from Egypt to the beginning of Judah's exile. In the Torah, Israel escapes the oppression of Egypt, and after a hard journey through the wilderness, is ready to enter the land promised to the heroic ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now the book of Joshua begins immediately following the death of Moses, who led Israel on its 40-year journey from Egypt. The books of our course tell the story of Israel's life in the land. It is a story which emphasizes and evaluates leadership. God's servant Joshua is the sole leader in the book of Joshua. After he delivers Israel from its enemies and conquers them by closely following God, Judges deals with the in-between period, before Israel has a monarchy and after the heroic age of Moses and Joshua. In Judges, Israel struggles with its enemies and with the right style of leadership. Finally, Samuel and Kings deal with the time of the monarchy, a story overwhelmingly devoted to the house of David. In the end, even this royal dynasty, blessed by God and promised a never-ending reign, even this dynasty ends, and with it ends the kingdom. And so at the end of Kings, the people are once again a landless people, no longer secure and at rest in their land, to use a biblical phrase. Israel has failed to live up to its obligations to follow God's instruction, and finds itself bereft of the promised land. The reason scholars have dubbed this story Deuteronomistic is that the narrative point of view in the story evaluates Israel's actions by how faithful they are to God's instructions found in the book of Deuteronomy. These instructions are passed on to Israel through Moses, who reminds them of their obligations to adhere to God's commands closely if they are to enjoy life in the land. In the end, Israel is expelled from the land by the Mesopotamian superpowers Assyria and Babylonia. It is true one could simply say that the people of Israel were no match for the aggressive, acquisitive Mesopotamian superpowers, that this insignificant people was doomed to fall to the empires. However, the biblical writers do not tell the story that way. They argue that Israel failed, and the invaders succeeded because Israel was not true to God's instruction. And so God used the Assyrians and the Babylonians to punish Israel, to force it from the land, as an act of cleansing. As you can tell, we will be covering a lot of ground in the course. After all, 900 years in 2 weeks is a tall order. However, these stories are foundational for understanding ancient Israel. Besides the reading and lectures, the main components of the course include discussion boards, 2 quizzes on the biblical content, a short paper dealing with a passage from the texts, and a take-home essay exam. Now let me tell you something about myself. I am the Minister of Faith Development at Beargrass Christian Church in Louisville and have been there 15 years. I have been adjunct professor of Hebrew Bible at Lexington Seminary since 2009 and have prior teaching experience in a variety of schools. I originally hail from the West Coast, but have lived in Texas, Georgia, and Kentucky for more than 20 years. My wife is also a disciples minister, and we have 2 daughters in their 20s who are both in graduate school. If you have questions about the course along the way, please feel free to contact me by email or phone. I will be glad to have a conversation with you on Skype as well if you contact me to set it up. I hope you learn to enjoy these texts as much as I do.